Anyone want to trade? She laughed, lifting her wine glass like it was a mic drop. Mine leaves socks everywhere and can't cook to save his life. But hey, he fixes the Wi-Fi. Everyone laughed. Not just polite chuckles. Real belly laughter, the kind that makes people slap the table and look around to make sure everyone else caught it too. Even Tom, her best friend's husband, gave her a wink. She basked in it. Karen always had timing. But the only one not laughing was me. I was sitting 2 seats away from her. Close enough to smell the Merlot she always bought on sale and claimed tasted just like Napa. Close enough to hear the smugness in her voice, the practiced nonchalance in the way she tossed her hair over her shoulder like she was auditioning for some midlife rom-com. I didn't blink. I didn't smile. I didn't scowl. I just put down my fork, looked at her, and said, flat as a spreadsheet, I've already filed the paperwork. That was the moment the room died. You ever hear a wine glass stop mid-clink? That sharp inhale someone takes right before they decide not to say what they were going to. That was the entire dining room. Everyone froze. Someone coughed. I think it was Marianne. Poor thing always hated tension. Karen? She blinked. Then she laughed. Too loud. Okay, you got me. He wins. Guess we're trading jokes now. Silence. I didn't laugh. Didn't crack a smile. I just folded my napkin, stood, and looked around the table. Thanks for dinner, I said to Jason, our host. Lovely evening. Then I walked out. I didn't slam the door. Didn't throw a scene. Didn't shout from the driveway or leave a trail of melodrama. Just slid into my car and drove off. Calm. Focused. Done. Now here's the thing most people don't realize about jokes like that. They're rarely jokes. Not when they're built on years of passive digs, eye rolls, and that fake pity laughter Karen had perfected every time I talked about anything I cared about. But I didn't say that. I didn't need to. You could see it on her face when she got home an hour later. Face flushed, breathing uneven, probably thinking I'd be waiting in the den like some scolded husband in a Hallmark movie. Except the den was empty. So was the closet on my side. And the garage. And the desk drawer where I used to keep receipts, warranties, passports. All gone. Like a breeze had swept through and carried every trace of me out the front door. On the kitchen counter sat a manila folder. Neat. Labeled. Divorce petition. Signed and stamped. Filed 2 days earlier. She stood there for a good 10 minutes. Hand on the marble countertop like it could anchor her to reality. Like the cold stone would help her figure out how the hell I had outplayed her in a game she didn't even realize we were playing. But the truth? I didn't just leave. I planned. Because you don't spend 15 years being belittled, dismissed, and publicly mocked by your own wife without learning to play the long game. The joke wasn't the spark. That dinner was just the final checkmate. The last square. And now, since you've made it this far, let me say something real quick. More than 97% of you who hear these stories never hit subscribe. If you're one of them, fixing that takes 2 seconds and helps our team do what we do best. Tell stories like this that hit where it hurts and where it heals. Just saying. Back to her. She called. 6 times before midnight. I didn't answer. The 7th call came from her sister. I didn't answer that one either. Eventually, she texted, "What the hell is going on?" No response. She must have thought I was just blowing off steam. That she'd get her little apology after I sulked for a few days. That I'd come crawling back with flowers and some garbage about how I overreacted. But Karen forgot something crucial. I was never the one who made things public. She was. Every time she called me useless at dinner. Every time she joked that my job wasn't real work. Every time she made that face. Yeah, you know the one, the tight-lipped smirk women give their friends when their husband starts talking too long. Like they're enduring something instead of loving someone. That night, she didn't just tell a joke. She told the world she didn't respect me. And that was the only punchline I needed. Karen sprinted out of Jason's house like she was chasing a child into traffic. Her heels clacked on the driveway, her dress fluttering awkwardly in the cold air as she squinted into the night. My taillights were already disappearing down the street. She didn't even make it to the sidewalk before the neighbor's porch lights flicked on. Drawn like moths to the scent of drama. She stood there, breathless, confused, not used to being the one left behind. Karen doesn't chase. Karen gets chased. At least that's what she's always believed. Back inside, she muttered something about a misunderstanding to the other guests. Said I had a rough day. Tried to smile, but her lip twitched when someone asked if I was serious. She mumbled an excuse and left 10 minutes later, forgetting her jacket on the back of the chair. That's how rattled she was. When she walked through the front door of our house, the first thing she noticed was the quiet. Not the peaceful kind. Not the end of a good day kind. No, this was a vacuum. A stillness that sucked the warmth out of the walls. Her heels echoed on the hardwood as she called out my name. Mark! No answer. The hallway lights were on, but only the ones I always left on for her. Habit. Old habits, apparently, die cleaner than expected. She walked into the bedroom, confused at first, then paused, stared. Half the closet was gone. No mess. No suitcase in the middle of the floor. Just clean, empty hangers on one side, and her chaotic splash of cardigans and Target dresses on the other. The familiar scent of my cologne was fainter already. The bathroom cabinet told the same story. My shaving kit, gone. Toothbrush, gone. Razor, gone. Even the Tylenol I always bought because she swore the store brand gave her headaches. All of it like I'd never been there. She moved to the kitchen. Maybe I left a note. Maybe I was staying at my brother's. Or my mother's. Maybe this was a dramatic point she could fix with a bottle of wine and some dramatic apology intimacy. Then she saw it. The manila folder. Sitting dead center on the granite countertop, like a crime scene prop. Her name typed neatly on the front. Karen L. Whitmore, personal. She opened it like it might contain a ransom demand. Inside were 3 sheets of paper. Divorce petition. Filed 2 days ago. Signed. Stamped. Grounds. Irreconcilable differences. Attached. Pre-prepared asset division schedule. Separate legal rep listed for me. I'd already retained counsel. Efficient. Cold. Professional. She sank onto the kitchen stool, still in her gala dress. The zipper dug into her ribs. She didn't notice. It wasn't just that I left. It was how I left. No fight. No slammed doors. No shouting. No dramatic accusations. Just clean, surgical detachment. The kind of exit that says, I've been thinking about this far longer than you have. The kind of exit that removes your power by refusing to acknowledge you're owed a conversation. She texted me, Mark, what the hell is this? No reply. She sent another. Come home and talk to me. But I was already somewhere else. Not just physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually gone. She tried calling. Straight to voicemail. Not even the satisfying ring that gives you the illusion they might pick up. Just cold digital rejection. She wandered into the study, hoping maybe I'd left my laptop. It was gone. So was the safe. Actually, no, not gone. The safe was open, empty. Every document we ever stored, birth certificates, tax returns, passports, insurance policies, mine were gone. Hers were still there. I wasn't hiding from her. I was removing myself. That realization hit her harder than anything else. She wasn't being punished. She was being excluded. And in a weird way that cut deeper. Because punishment still implies a connection. Anger still requires care. But this was indifference weaponized. She sat there for hours, just staring at the folder. Thinking, no doubt, that this had to be a scare tactic. Some elaborate overreaction to a harmless joke. But somewhere in the back of her mind, under the panic and denial and ego, she knew the truth. I hadn't just reacted. I'd prepared. She opened the fridge out of habit. The leftover tie she liked was still there. My meal prep containers? Gone. Clean shelf. She sat back down, looked at her wedding ring, fiddled with it like she could rewind the night by spinning it backward. But it wasn't magic. It was just gold. And like everything else I left behind, it didn't matter anymore. Not to me. The next morning, Karen woke up in the same dress she wore to dinner. Her mascara had left a sharp smudge across her pillowcase, like a black slash from a censor's pen. She reached instinctively for her phone and dialed my number. Twice, back to back. Straight to voicemail both times. No ring. No delay. Just the deadpan woman's voice. The number you have dialed is unavailable at this time. She stared at the phone like it might apologize. Didn't. She checked my email next. We had a shared inbox for house projects, travel plans, subscription reminders. When she tried to log in, it kicked her out. Password changed. Recovery email removed. She tried my personal email, same result. She opened her laptop and clicked through our shared Dropbox. The files were still there. House deeds, wedding photos, travel itineraries, but a new folder had appeared at the bottom. Archived on SRMW. She clicked. Empty. Her hands started shaking. It wasn't panic yet. Not full-blown. It was confusion. Mild disorientation. Like when you stand up too fast and your vision swims. She wasn't afraid. Not yet. Karen doesn't get afraid. She gets annoyed. She gets outraged. But that morning, she was just lost. She got dressed like she was going into battle. Crisp blazer, jeans, not a hair out of place. She even applied concealer. Like the courthouse stamp on that divorce petition might fade under enough foundation. Her first stop, my office. Or what used to be my office. She marched into the downtown building, head high, jaw set. Marcia at the front desk barely looked up. Karen approached with the smile she always used on service workers. A thin veneer of friendliness wrapped around veiled superiority. "Hi. I'm here to see Mark Whitmore." Marcia paused. "Oh, he's no longer with us." Karen blinked. "Since when?" Marcia checked a calendar that didn't need checking. "He resigned. Last Monday." Karen felt a chill move up her spine. "He didn't say anything to me." Marcia gave her a look that said not my problem and returned to her emails. Karen stood there a moment longer, then turned and walked out, muttering under her breath. In the parking lot, she checked their joint bank account from her phone. Her fingers hesitated on the login screen. She hadn't checked it in weeks. There was always enough. Always had been. The balance read $134.22. A moment passed before it registered. Not zero. Not frozen. Just emptied. Legally. A clean sweep, followed by a quiet exit. My direct deposit was long gone, of course, diverted to a different account 2 weeks ago. One she couldn't access. One she didn't even know existed. Because she'd never asked. Because Karen assumed I'd always be there. Always loyal. Always predictable. She sat there in the car for a long time, staring at the screen, refreshing it like a magician might reverse the trick. Then she called my brother. "Hey Nathan, it's Karen. Have you heard from Mark?" Long pause. "No," he said. "Nothing? Not even a text?" "Nope." "Okay, well, if you do." She heard it. The hesitation. The kind people make when they know something they're not allowed to say. She cut in sharply. "Nathan, I'm not getting in the middle of this." That landed like a slap. "In the middle of what?" Pause again. Then, quietly, "You crossed a line." Click. She stared at the phone like it had betrayed her. Then she called Matt, our old friend from college. Straight to voicemail. She texted, "Call me when you can. Something weird is going on." No reply. She pulled into the driveway of his house 10 minutes later. Knocked on the door. His wife answered and gave her a tight smile. "Hi, Karen. I need to talk to Matt." "He's at work." Karen frowned. "It's Sunday." "I know." The door didn't open any wider. Karen stood there, stunned. "Do you know what's going on with Mark?" The woman didn't blink. "I think you should ask yourself that question." Door shut. Lock clicked. The growing fear that had been crawling up her throat all day finally made it to her mouth. She tasted copper. It wasn't that she couldn't find me. It was that no one wanted to help her find me. People were loyal to me. Not because I demanded it, but because I earned it. Over years. In the little ways that Karen always dismissed as unnecessary. She called it overfunctioning. Said I cared too much what people thought. Said I should toughen up. Maybe she was right. Because the man she knew, he was gone. And every person she tried to lean on, leaned away. She thought she was the center of our social circle. Turns out she was just the orbiting body. The planet. I was the gravity. And without me, her whole world had started to drift. The denial didn't crack right away. Karen told herself I was just playing games. That I'd make my point, go stay at some Airbnb with self-pity and overpriced bourbon for a week, then come back ready to talk. Apologize. Fix it. She even rehearsed the conversation in her head. How she'd say I overreacted. How it was just a joke. How we'd laugh about it someday over wine. She imagined herself being generous. Forgiving. The bigger person. But each day the silence held. Uninterrupted. Total. No texts. No emails. Not even a lawyer's letter. By day 4, she started hunting. She didn't just Google me. She dug. Searched tax records, social media, public court filings. Nothing. Like I'd folded myself out of the world and slipped into a crack no one else could see. And then, because Karen is nothing if not persistent, she refreshed LinkedIn. She didn't even remember why she had a profile until the site asked her to confirm her current position. She ignored the prompt, typed my name in the search bar, and paused. No results. She tried again. Mark Whitmore, managing partner Carrington and Company. Nothing. Then she checked the company page. Banner image updated. Team photo refreshed. Right there, in bold blue font, Graham Ellis, CEO, Carrington and Company. Karen blinked. Graham? Graham, who still wore square-toed loafers and brought egg salad to potlucks. Graham, who once asked her if TikTok was the name of a clock company. CEO? She clicked his profile. Updated last week. His smiling face, same bad haircut. Below that, 2 bullet points that punched the breath out of her. Promoted to CEO following internal acquisition. Former partner Mark Whitmore exits after 12-year tenure. She stared at it like it might change if she didn't blink. Internal acquisition. Exited. No farewell post. No thank you message to clients. Just gone. She slammed her laptop shut like it had insulted her. But the real blow came 3 hours later. Over coffee with a former coworker she ran into at the cafe down the street. Hey, Karen. She looked up, trying to sound casual. Oh, hey. You hear anything about Mark? I saw Graham got CEO wild, right? The woman paused, then nodded slowly. Yeah, wild. Karen smiled tightly. Weird that Mark didn't say anything. I mean, he built that firm. Another pause. Then, I thought you knew. He sold his shares. Quietly. A few weeks ago. Karen blinked. He what? Yeah. Full exit. Graham got his stake. Rumor is Mark negotiated a payout, something like high 6s, maybe low 7s? Left everything. Moved, I think. Karen's mouth was dry. Moved. Out of state. Someone said Wyoming. Or Oregon. Or somewhere in between. I don't know. He's off the radar. Her hand trembled just slightly as she sipped her latte. The conversation moved on. But in Karen's mind, something split clean down the middle. It wasn't just that I'd left the firm. It was that I'd left no trail. Like I'd walked away from the life she assumed I was tethered to, and never looked back. Like she had built this narrative of us, this static domestic sitcom, where the characters stayed the same forever. Mark, the dependable husband. Mark, the background guy. Mark, the Wi-Fi fixer. She never imagined Mark as the exit planner, the financial strategist, the ghost in designer shoes. Back home, she opened our filing cabinet. Every year I printed our tax records, filed them neatly, color-coded tabs. That irritated her to no end. Why not just scan it all like a normal person? She'd say. She opened the folder labeled Investments. It was bare. Not empty. Removed. Tabs gone. Papers gone. Only the placeholders left. The skeleton of our financials. She moved to the bedroom, pulled out the drawer where I kept old passports, IDs. All gone. She didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, she sat at the kitchen counter with her phone in hand and opened our Chase banking app again. Not the checking. The investments. The screen flickered and then loaded. Account closed. No longer active. Her pulse thudded in her neck. This wasn't a man in pain. This wasn't a man acting out of spite. This was something else entirely. A man who'd been waiting, preparing. And when the moment came, he didn't react. He executed. The envelope was thick, one of those stiff, official-looking ones with a pre-printed label and a barcode across the front. Delivered by hand. Signed for. Karen didn't even hear the knock. She found it when she opened the door mid-morning to grab a package she'd forgotten she ordered. There it was, tucked behind the Amazon box of overpriced facial serums she didn't really need anymore. She stood in the doorway for a second, envelope in hand, dread blooming low in her stomach like rot. No return address. No handwriting. No note tucked under the flap saying please call me or we need to talk. Just cold, bureaucratic silence in paper form. Inside, a stack of documents, professionally bound, neatly tabbed. At the top, in bold, emotionless font, transfer of real property, joint tenancy to sole ownership. She read it again, and again. The house was now hers. Sole owner Karen L. Whitmore. Attached were forms verifying the quitclaim deed had been filed. The property reassigned. Mortgage transfer authorization enclosed. Along with documents confirming the utility accounts, HOA fees, and property tax notices had been updated to reflect a single name. Her name. No note. No post-it with a snide remark. Not even a good luck. Just a calculated wall of ink and legalese that said, in essence, it's all yours. Every brick, every bill, every broken pipe. Enjoy. First she laughed. Short, bitter, and high-pitched. Of course he'd do this. Mark always was the king of silent theatrics. She told herself it was petty, passive-aggressive, a last-ditch flex to feel in control. But that laugh didn't last long. Because as she flipped through the pages, she realized something chilling. This wasn't a power move. It was an exit strategy. He wasn't punishing her. He was cutting the cord. Karen's mind flashed through the implications. The mortgage, wasn't it $3,200 a month? And hadn't the insurance just gone up after the basement leak? And wasn't the furnace due for servicing in winter? And wasn't there still that outstanding assessment from the HOA about the retaining wall? She walked over to the sink, set the packet down, and stared out the kitchen window. The yard needed mowing. The gutters were full. The garage door opener had been glitching since April. Mark used to fix all of that, quietly, without asking, while she was watching Netflix in bed, or out at brunch complaining about how emotionally unavailable he was. She used to joke that he was more appliance than man. Turns out, he'd been the only thing keeping the house from falling apart. She picked up the documents again, flipping through them faster now. Each page felt heavier than the last. It wasn't just a house. It was a load, and he'd handed it to her with the same indifference you might give someone a shopping list. She thought about calling the lawyer listed on the cover sheet. Then she realized she couldn't. Not without opening the floodgate. Not without admitting this wasn't a glitch. It was a design. And she was the one still standing in the blueprint. She grabbed her phone and opened her calendar. All those little recurring events. Mark, trash day. Mark, property tax reminder. Mark, sprinklers. She had never changed them. They just sat there like ghosts. She hit delete, one after the other. Then she sat down on the edge of the bed, the side he used to sleep on, and pulled the documents into her lap. Her fingers hovered over the line that said owner signature required. It was blank, not because he'd forgotten, but because that signature was hers to give now. He'd left her everything, on paper, but in reality, he'd left nothing. No leverage, no connection, no door cracked open for reconciliation. He wasn't trying to win. He wasn't trying to prove a point. He was simply done. She stood up and walked through the house, his house, now her house, suddenly aware of how cavernous it felt. Every room echoed. The floor creaked differently. The fridge hummed louder. She noticed the bulb in the hallway was flickering, the same one he used to change without being asked. She reached up, stood on a chair, and tried to unscrew it. Her nails snapped. The bulb wouldn't budge. She climbed down slowly, staring up at the dimming light. It flickered once more, then went dark. And for the first time, Karen understood what it meant to be left holding the baggage, and to realize it was all hers now by design. The invitation came folded inside a thick cream envelope, the kind only old money institutions still bother with. Gold-embossed lettering. That obnoxious serif font charities use when they're asking for absurd amounts of money while pretending to care about the environment. Karen nearly threw it away, assuming it was just another desperate bid for attention from the social circles she'd drifted from since the divorce that wasn't technically final. But then she read the event name, the Whitmore Garden Gala, an annual fundraiser they used to attend together, hosted by the same board that once gave her a plaque for community elegance and influence, whatever that meant. It had been his idea to get involved in the first place. Mark always believed philanthropy was about showing up, not just writing checks. And Karen? She believed it was about getting your picture taken between the local anchorwoman and the city comptroller's wife. She RSVP'd out of something she told herself was curiosity, but really, it was hunger. Hunger for answers, for attention, maybe for closure. She arrived late, intentionally, the kind of late that says, yes, I'm important enough to miss cocktails but necessary enough to arrive before dessert. Her dress was a deep navy, almost black, elegant, expensive. She'd bought it on credit 2 days before. It still had the scent of new silk and the guilt of an impulse. She stepped into the ballroom like a woman entering her kingdom after exile. People noticed. Not many, not right away, but enough. Small nods, 2 polite hellos, 1 too long stare from a man she used to flirt with before she got bored of his startup talk. Then the MC tapped the mic. And now, we'd like to recognize a generous anonymous donation that will fund the Whitmore Scholarship through the next decade. A truly extraordinary gesture from a returning friend of the foundation. Scattered applause. Karen's hands froze mid-clap. Anonymous? Her eyes scanned the room, slow and deliberate, until they landed on a cluster near the back wall. A knot of men, well-dressed, well-fed, the kind who talk quietly but sign loudly. Real estate developers, bankers, one woman, tall and sharp like a skyline. And in the center of them, smiling, nodding, casually holding a glass of scotch like it weighed nothing, Mark, or someone who looked like him. The hair was shorter, neater, a beard now well-kept, deliberate. The suit, not the safe blues and grays he used to wear. Midnight black, no tie, just enough rebellion to say, I don't work for anyone anymore. Her heart surged. Without thinking, she moved toward him, heels whispering across the marble floor, the scent of orchids and expensive cologne tangling in her nose. She was 10 feet away when the wall appeared. Not literal, just two men. Security. They didn't shout, didn't touch her. One simply stepped in, polite but firm. Ma'am, this section is restricted. Karen blinked. I'm just trying to speak to. Restricted, he repeated, not unkindly. She looked past him. Mark hadn't even turned around. He was laughing at something someone said. Laughing. That sound she hadn't heard in months. Years, maybe. And not the tight, strained laugh she used to summon from him with her jokes. But something loose, confident. Oh, she took a half-step forward. The second man stepped in sync. No threats, just trained precision. She could feel the stares behind her. A woman trying to talk to a man who didn't want to be spoken to. A woman stopped at the velvet line. Not because she was a threat, but because she didn't belong. She stepped back, smoothed her dress, tried to blink the sting out of her eyes before it ruined her makeup. As she turned, one of the security men quietly added. He asked not to be approached. The floor shifted beneath her then. He hadn't just left. He'd removed her. She walked to the edge of the ballroom, toward the hallway with the restroom signs. Locked herself in the empty powder room and stared at the mirror. The lights were brutal. Every detail of her face, the creases around her eyes, the tightness at the corners of her mouth, the effort, was on display. She wasn't the woman who used to run rooms like this. Not anymore. And he wasn't the man who stood beside her. He was the man who now operated in rooms where she needed clearance. Where her name was no longer currency. Where his laughter didn't include her anymore. She wanted to scream. Instead, she washed her hands, reapplied lipstick, and walked out of the powder room with her chin up and heart pounding like a closing door. Back in the ballroom, Mark was gone. No trace, just a name in a speech, an empty scotch glass, and the unmistakable feeling that she'd become a ghost in his world. And he had already started over. Without her, without a word. Her shoes hit the tile too hard as she came through the front door, the kind of uneven, agitated rhythm that made the dog flinch, if the dog were still there. But he'd taken Baxter too. Quietly. Weeks ago. The crate was still in the garage, folded and leaning against the wall like a reminder of how many things she hadn't noticed disappearing. Karen tossed her clutch onto the counter, missed, let it fall to the floor with a slap. She didn't bend down to pick it up. Her fingers went to the back of her neck, pressing hard into the muscles like pressure could reset the night, drag it back before security stepped in, before she stood like some unwelcome ex-wife in heels too expensive for rejection. She poured a glass of wine, her third for the evening, and sat on the edge of the couch, staring into the dark living room. Every surface gleamed like a showroom. Too clean, too still, not lived in, managed. The house had become a monument to absence. Every item still hers. Every square foot empty in ways she couldn't vacuum away. Her phone buzzed on the glass table. She grabbed it instinctively, assuming it was Anna or Elise, maybe Marion texting some platitude like, "You looked great tonight," or "He looked like hell without you." Both lies designed to keep her from breaking the wine glass against the nearest wall. But it wasn't them. No contact name. Just a number. Not familiar. And the message. Tell them the trade offer still stands. Might take it this time. Her mouth went dry. Wine suddenly tasted like vinegar. She read it again. And again. Trade offer. Trade. Her own words, from that night, thrown back like a dart to the center of her spine. Anyone want to trade? She had said it with wine on her breath and sarcasm in her voice. Laughed. Expected him to laugh too. He hadn't. And now, months later, after she'd been locked out, cut off, publicly frozen and personally discarded, he sends this. No anger. No insults. Just the echo. Echoes are crueler than shouting. Echoes mean you remember. That you waited to repeat it. She stared at the screen, thumb hovering over the reply bar. What is this supposed to mean? You're being childish. We need to talk. She started typing all three, deleting each one halfway. Finally she wrote, Mark, don't do this. But when she hit send, error. Message failed to send. She hit info on the number. Blocked from reply. No contact available. Number untraceable. Disconnected. Gone. She sat there, staring at the text, until her eyes blurred and her shoulders slumped. Because it wasn't just the message that landed. It was the fact that he knew she'd be alone tonight. Knew she'd be watching. Knew she'd see him at that gala, unable to reach him, and then return home to an empty house thinking maybe, just maybe, there was a door still cracked. And then he closed it. With one sentence. She wasn't angry. Not this time. She felt something else entirely. Shame. The bitter kind. The kind that doesn't come from what someone does to you, but from what you realize you did to yourself. She tried to sleep. Couldn't. Walked the halls instead. Every photo frame in the hallway was still full of smiles. Vacations, anniversaries, that one picture from Mexico where he had his arm around her waist like she was something worth protecting. She took that frame down. Not to throw it. Just to turn it face down on the side table. Then another. And another. By sunrise, the hallway looked like a gallery after the show's been taken down. Just shadows where things used to be. The envelope was too nice. Karen stared at it on the dining table like it might explode. Heavy cardstock. Handwritten calligraphy, real ink. Not printed. No return address. But the wax seal stamped with a simple W made her heart thud once. Sharply. She broke it open with the corner of a steak knife. Careful not to tear it. Not really sure why. Inside. You are cordially invited to the inaugural Founders Circle dinner. One guest. Business formal. Location. The Orlin Atrium. 7 p.m. sharp. No sender listed. Just a crisp RSVP deadline and a gold foil logo at the bottom. A minimalist triangle with a single at the center. She'd seen that logo before. Years ago, late at night, when Mark had pulled out a napkin and drawn it while talking about some long-shot dream he had. A private capital group. Real estate, renewable energy, infrastructure. He called it a sandbox for grown-ups with a conscience. She had laughed. Told him he was too soft for the sharks. Said he should stick to spreadsheets. Now the logo was embossed on $12 paper. She Googled the venue, Orlin Atrium, glass walls, rooftop gardens, private elevators, exclusive to members and million-dollar donors only. Karen didn't RSVP. Not right away. She told herself it was a mistake. A fluke. Maybe someone else invited her, trying to pull her back into relevance. But the night before the deadline, she caved. Clicked the QR code. Entered her name. Not Whitmore. Karen Langley, her maiden name. The one on her driver's license, her passport, the one she'd stopped using 18 years ago. The automated response read, confirmed. One seat. Spectator. She stared at the word for a long time. Spectator. Not attendee. Not guest. Not participant. Like she was being invited to watch something, not join it. That Friday, she dressed with surgical precision. Sleek black gown. Hair pinned up. Earrings he once bought her in Prague. Back when she still said thank you for things. Lipstick one shade darker than her usual, like armor. The car dropped her off in front of the atrium at 6:57. She climbed the marble steps alone, trying not to look up, afraid she might see his silhouette through the glass. The doorman checked her name against a list, paused, then gave a faint nod. This way, Ms. Langley. It landed like a slap. Inside, the room glowed, not just from light but from money. The kind of money that doesn't wear labels, it funds them. People milled around in tailored silence. Men who ran cities. Women who dismantled legislation over cocktails. Not a single familiar face. Not one person who looked like they'd ever sat through PDA meetings or suburban HOA disputes about fence height. She was escorted past the mingling, up a curved staircase, into a smaller mezzanine balcony that overlooked the main floor. Private area. 24 seats. One table. All perfectly spaced. Her nameplate waited at the end. Karen Langley, spectator. She blinked. Took the seat. The man beside her didn't make eye contact. The woman across from her typed something into her phone and laughed softly at the response. No one asked who she was. No one seemed surprised she was there, which was somehow worse. She watched the room below slowly fill. At precisely 7:10, the lights dimmed, and the glass curtain on the far wall shifted. A stage emerged, and Mark walked onto it. Not hurried. Not shy. Confident. Polished. Dark suit. Open collar. That same triangle dot logo on his lapel. He looked like he belonged there. Not like a guest. Like the architect. Karen's mouth went dry. No teleprompter. No notes. He began to speak. 3 years ago, I left something that looked a lot like stability. A house. Company. A name. He didn't look up toward her balcony. Not once. I traded predictability for precision. Comfort for conviction. Some people didn't understand. Some still don't. But this, he gestured behind him, where the logo shimmered on a massive screen. This is what I built in the silence. There was no applause. Just the kind of stillness that means people are listening too hard to clap. He continued. Spoke of partnerships, of funding cycles, of next-generation urban developments in zones once labeled non-viable. He name-dropped investors, board members, even government officials. Every sentence landed like a brick in the foundation of something larger. Karen's fingers dug into her clutch under the table. She didn't know what hurt more, that he'd done it without her, or that he'd done it because of her. This wasn't about her anymore. She wasn't the punchline. She wasn't the obstacle. She wasn't even the ex-wife. She was the empty chair next to his at the start of something massive. And she'd been given a front-row seat, not to celebrate, but to watch. Near the end of the dinner, when wine glasses were half empty and waitstaff moved like shadows through candlelight, Mark returned to the stage. No fanfare, no music, just a quiet hush falling over the room as the founder stepped into view again. Karen's fingers curled around the stem of her glass so tightly she felt the muscles in her palm begin to ache. She hadn't touched the food. Her plate was still full, untouched steak, a garnish wilting at the edge. Around her, people leaned forward with curiosity, anticipation. But she already knew this wasn't about quarterly growth or development projections. This was about her, even if no one else in the room realized it yet. Mark stood still for a moment, as if calibrating his breath. Then he said, 3 years ago, I was reminded of how replaceable some people think we are. A polite silence swept across the floor. I was someone's joke, a routine, a throwaway line. And I realized, if that's the role I'm playing in someone's story, then maybe I should start writing my own. Karen flinched. She didn't mean to, but her body betrayed her. Her stomach twisted. Her jaw locked. I made a trade, Mark continued. Comfort for clarity. Silence for strategy. And I started again. The screen behind him flickered to images of blueprints. Cities. Skyscrapers in progress. Rows of smiling young architects. Renewable energy hubs. Low-income housing developments already breaking ground. I didn't announce it. I didn't advertise it. I just got to work. His voice stayed calm, level. But beneath it was something she recognized. A precision honed not by rage, but by resolve. This foundation, this circle, this life, he said, gesturing to the crowd around him, exists because I was underestimated, because I was dismissed. Karen sat perfectly still, but her chest felt like it was collapsing inward. Like something dense and sharp had settled behind her ribs and refused to move. Mark gave a brief nod. So to anyone in this room who's ever been called invisible, forgettable, replaceable, don't correct them. Just show them. Applause. Not wild. Not performative. Just steady. Real. And still, he never looked up. Never once scanned the upper balcony. Never acknowledged the woman sitting frozen behind a name card that read, Spectator. Then, the moment that broke the silence. A voice. Maybe from the press table below, maybe from a shareholder near the front, called out casually, Hey, is that your wife? A light-hearted question. A wink of familiarity. Mark's reply came without pause, without venom, without even the decency of hesitation. I don't have one. The laughter that followed was light, polite. No one understood what they'd just witnessed. But Karen did. She didn't move, didn't breathe, because in that one sentence he didn't just deny her. He erased her. Not angrily, not vengefully, just factually. Like you'd say I don't own a cat or I don't eat gluten. She stood up too fast. Her chair screeched slightly behind her. Couple heads turned. She managed a tight smile, muttered something about needing air, and stepped out of the mezzanine. The hallway was empty. She pressed her back against the wall and let her body slide to the floor. It wasn't the insult. It was the truth of it. She had once mocked him with a joke meant to get a laugh at his expense. And he had answered not with rage, but with removal. The worst part? She hadn't even realized when the moment happened. When he stopped being her husband and became something else. Something untouchable. Something done with her. She stared at the floor. The guilt bloomed first, dark and familiar. But then something colder crept in. Finality. She hadn't just lost him. She had been cut out of the version of his life that now mattered. Not an asterisk. Not a footnote. Not even a name. Just gone. The valet was pulling up his car as she caught sight of him across the lot, just beyond the warm amber lights of the atrium entrance. The rest of the guests had thinned out. Chauffeurs waiting, low murmurs echoing beneath expensive laughter. Karen moved fast, heels clicking against the stone path, her clutch clutched like a lifeline. She didn't think, didn't plan. She just moved. Like if she hesitated, he might evaporate again into that new, untouchable orbit he'd built. Mark! He turned, slowly. No surprise on his face. Just calm recognition. Like he'd already predicted this exact moment and had been politely waiting for her to arrive in it. She stopped a few feet from him, close enough to see the lines on his face. The softness in his eyes that had somehow hardened into something else. Not bitterness. Not anger. Just finality. You were my husband. It wasn't a question. It wasn't an accusation. It was all she had left. A broken fact spoken into cold air. Mark tilted his head, hands casually tucked into his coat pockets. I was, he said evenly. And then you joked about trading me. She winced, visibly, like the words had teeth. I didn't mean it. You meant it enough to say it in front of everyone. Her voice dropped. It was just a joke. He looked at her like a doctor might look at a patient describing a symptom too late. Not cruel. Not triumphant. Just disappointed. Tired. He nodded once. So was mine. She blinked. What? He took a step closer, not threatening but definitive. His voice didn't rise. It didn't shake. The difference is mine had follow-through. The valet arrived. A sleek black sedan. One she didn't recognize. The license plate clean. New state. New life. He gave a small nod to the driver, then turned back to her one last time. Good night, Karen. That was it. No speech. No closure. No tearful hug. No maybe someday. Just good night. He slid into the car. The door shut with a soft click. She didn't say anything. Couldn't. Her mouth was open slightly, like the words were still loading, still buffering through the shock. The car pulled away. And this time she didn't chase it. She stood under the parking lot lights, alone in her $1,000 gown, watching the tail lights fade into the dark until they were gone. Gone like the man she once laughed at instead of with. Gone like the life she thought she controlled. Gone like the joke that never was.